Hey guys, just a little bit of PoE1 builds. I'm working on Antiquaran. It's a ward stacker utilizing night grips and then some combination of this helmet and some certain tattoos, and then just a really big armor evasion chest that get a bunch of ward. But yeah, this is almost 3.4 thousand flat out of chaos, and it's pretty durable. It's got quite a bit of block, and that's lucky block. So you add, I think it's half or half the value on top of this is what that roughly equals out to be. Then it gets 6 endurance charges, and it has 77 all res, 78, and then ideally with some better gear, chaos res. It's using volcanic fissure with shockwave, and then a boom mace for the trigger. So the shockwave carries the weapon damage, and the boom mace on top of my skill. So it turns out to be pretty tanky for a non-crit build, has pretty decent damage for a non-crit build, and then it's also quite durable.
Will not go
But yeah, I'll do this shaper. It's just a normal shaper because I don't have the parts for the Uber. Show you this, and I'll do a map afterwards so you can get a gist of the clear, and then I'll dive into how the build's put together.
My monitor's gone. This is your final warning. Leave. You force my hand again, little mouse. So be it. You've chosen to side with chaos. This is my world, and you shall obey my order. Insubstantial.
He's recovering. We need to find a way back quickly.
Behold the face of your unmaking!
Father, it's me. Let me help you.
The horror must be stopped. Obstacles destroyed!
To me, exile. I need some...
Imperfect!
Not for long. We need to get back.
Return to Kitaba. My monitor's These memories are mine. I cannot lose them.
They lied to you, Father. I'm your true memory.
To save the future, the past must be sacrificed.
To me, exile.
One of my captors felt no emotion. He did not hesitate to inflict pain. Now, all he feels is intense, unstoppable agony. That stretches the sanity of the mind.
Alright, hopefully that gives you kind of a view of the versatility of it. It's definitely not the highest single target ever, but I think it turned out pretty well considering the tankiness. I'd have to redo the POB, maybe in another video, but I believe last time I looked and had all the little boxes checked that it should, it was around 40k max hit for all the individual elements, or 45, and then roughly 40k for physical, and then its EHP is quite high because of the ward and then the Salvin. So, yeah, let's get into it. So, on the Antiquaran, it's usually, or mostly, just taking advantage of these nodes in conjunction with the belt. So, this node says give 50% of armor and evasion from equipped body armor as ward, and the belt with some defense modifiers on it is 60%. So this combines to 110. So you get 110% of the value of this armor, which is roughly 8k, a little bit more than that, almost 9 probably. And then that gets magnified by 100% right off the bat. So that turns an 18k ward. And then every time your ward breaks, you get Adrenaline, which is a pretty big little damage buff and also has some survivability tucked behind it. And then I've decided to kind of full tilt into the ward stacking of the gloves, and this is the next important piece. The gloves give you 10% of the ward as flat base added chaos. So in this example, let's just say I have 30k ward, I would get 3k flat added chaos, which is pretty on par with some strength stackers, maybe not on the very top end, but considering the other things it offers, it's pretty close. And then the downside of the glove is 75% of the damage bypasses ward, which then turns the ward into more like a guard skill more so than a barrier. But, you know, 25% of 30k is still a significant chunk of extra shield up. And then on that note, I've also leaned into this helmet, but for right now we'll talk about the Restoration Award, which I also have on the boots. And then combined with the Ascendancy, my ward regeneration rate is 0.6 seconds. So every time I take damage, my ward absorbs a part of it, and then my ward comes back up in 0.6 seconds, which then can absorb another hit. And then when you mix this with block from Salvin, you block most of the hits, and then when you don't block, you have this big shield or ward layer to also absorb some hits. And then because you're stacking so much global defenses, even though my chest piece is gone, you run Determination, and you get a ton of armor. So I have 20k armor just sitting here, and then if I hit my flask, it's 33k, and that's without a chest piece on. So, you know, if I take off the chest piece or the belt just to get 50% of my armor back, or 60% rather, it goes up pretty substantial amount, and then you start layering in some more defenses. You have the 50% fizz mitigation from Adrenaline, and then 6 endurance charges at full ramp. I believe that's 30% fizz and elemental damage reduction. It becomes a potent little character for surviving hits. Yeah, so that's the gist of it. It's a block build with ward. And then on the helmet, this is another piece I chose to go in. A rare helmet has its use cases. It frees up some other slots, but I thought if I'm going to play a ward stacker, I just want to go in the ward as much as possible. So I've been taking advantage of it with some of the wheels on the tree. So this node becomes pretty good for armor and evasion. So this is 15% more ward, or increased ward rather. This is 12% more ward. Then you can do some things with some jewels where you get life, ES is the prefixes, so then that turns into more ward and life, and then the Watcher's Eye becomes same deal. And then you can tattoo some other things for more increased energy shield, which then turns into ward. And speaking of the tattoos, eventually, with the very in-game setup, if I can make it work, I plan on going to this and moving this one node up there. And then the tattoos will make a lot more sense because right now I'm using Supreme Ozzitation, so I have no attribute requirements. And then essentially what that allows me to do is tattoo every attribute node on my tree. And I've chosen to go just melee damage everywhere on the blues, percent energy shield. And here I have movement speed on Dex. Late game, what I'm going to try to do is go accuracy on all the green nodes, then path over here, and get the 40% more damage if accuracy is higher than maximum life. This will be an extreme squeeze. I'll need to divine this to have a really nice accuracy roll. Then also my 2 rings will have to have accuracy suffixes, which is going to squeeze every piece of gear res-wise. So I think it's possible, but we shall see. I need to really work that out, but yeah, getting 40% more accuracy and then more damage and then hits never miss should be a pretty good combo. It's a little inefficient because you're getting accuracy, so this doesn't per se make sense. So I might leave it, but the plan was just to go to this and then just kind of have a little bit of anti-synergy, but as a non-crit build. 40% more damage is a lot, to be quite honest. Trying to think of other interesting defensive layers that it has. Oh yeah. So because I chose this as my node for the jewel, I get 80% avoid shock, and then this is my way of sustaining frenzy charges. Then also on the shield master, you get 20% of avoid elemental ailments, and then storm shroud, you get all your avoid ailment chance to lightning gets or shock rather gets applied to all elemental ailments. So this character is immune to shock, freeze, ignite, and all the alternate elements: brittle, sap, and scorch. So that's a nice little quality of life. I do have some additional thoughts about this. Since I am running Tempest Shield, that is a little inefficient because I'm already immune to shock. So I thought I could take this Pantheon, and then on this, I think I could swap this for an 80% chance to avoid being ignited, and then I'd just be immune to the major three. Brittle, shock, and sap don't happen all that often. But for right now, this is what I got going on because it was straightforward to me. And then my cluster jewel, the main node here is Overload, which allows you to get Fortify on hit, so you don't need these as support gem. And then Enduring Composure to generate my endurance charges. And this is this one's Mana Leech, and this one's just Maim. So I also have the Mastery here, the chill enemies based off my mace hit. So the chill and Maim, some of the mobs become incredibly slow, which is a nice little defensive layer. I also have Unwavering Stance, so I'm immune to stun. And then this is another major piece. I have some thoughts about swapping this to a 3% energy shield per small notable later. I think it ends up being slightly less damage because the build's starved for increased sources. However, it would give me more ward, which is more defense and also offense, and plus more ward should be just cool because I think it's possible to touch almost 50k hyper late game. We'll see though, but you know, just having a big number there's some aspect of that just being cool. Yeah. Then you can also take advantage of this mastery, 50% life if there's no life modifiers on equipped body armor, because on your body armor you just want pure armor evasion rolls. Yeah, I don't think there's too much else going on in passive tree that's unique or special. Yeah, so let's dive into the gear. So we've already covered night grips and their interaction between these two. The boots are just movement speed, life, ward, and restoration rate, which we covered earlier. Rings, this is just a res filler. Ideally, I think instead of energy shield, which is not entirely wasted because all this how this works, energy shield kind of becomes just like another buffer under your ward, so 89 energy shields is equivalent to 89 life. I've considered taking this if I could get like 200 or 300 energy shield, but I just don't see a feasible way to do that. But yeah, so ideally this would have like percent increased damage on it with like a veiled craft. But yeah, it's a res filler. My other ring is a makeshift onslaught ring that I also need to recraft. Ideally it'd be the same as the other ring with like a flat life roll, a veiled modifier for reduced cost of skills or increased damage, and then the reses. The boom mace, hyper late game, this would be accuracy, percent accuracy, attack speed, then veiled chaos pin, and then increased chaos damage crafted onto it. I haven't quite got to the point yet, or it's just frankly expensive and I just don't have the money to do it. Yeah, that's the idea with the weapon. And then probably super late, there isn't a chant if I play this build that long where all life leech with weapons is instantaneous, which would give you a lot of survivability. But I don't know, the build's pretty tanky. I don't know if I really need to lean more into survivability. The amulet, I think I got the exact thing I was looking for. I was really surprised this existed, and it was like a divine and a half because it's basically not useful for any other build. Getting the 16% defensive modifiers is a little tricky because you have to use the veil catalyst, and it puts a random quantity and a random type of catalyst on your item, so it's basically a lotto. So when I hit 16%, I just settled for it because it's close enough and it's an expensive endeavor. And then the anoint is 15% pin. It's a hidden notable here. And if you do decide to play this and you can't find Eyes of the Great Wolf, damage-wise, you can get pretty close with the Strangle Grasp. You could take these two nodes and this one, and then you would do like the big ES node. It's not quite as good, but it's pretty comparable. But again, I'm surprised this thing existed. Salvin, this is just like giga free block. It takes a character that's like semi-tanky and just makes it pseudo immortal. It's fantastic. And then in it, I have a little trick. Purifying Flame, the level doesn't really matter because all I'm using is the crit Consecrated Ground. I have that linked to increased area of effect. So the area creates is bigger, and then Calling Strike, because I block so often, this actually finishes off a lot of mobs. Oh yeah, and talk about the Boom Mace. The Boom Mace is this guy. You have to go on the wiki to find it, but it has a 1.3 second cooldown, and I believe it has like almost a 450% damage effectiveness, and it happens passively. And since I'm non-crit, the only other options are axes, and I thought about doing axes with like restoration of ward on hit, but like my ward already restores so fast, it's kind of not needed to some extent. So I thought the Boom Mace would kind of be thematic with Shockwave. But yeah, so in the weapon, you just link your supports to it. These need to be qualityed. Kind of forgot about that. Yeah, so this goes off, and then the Shockwave support is the other half of that, which is a mace support. Generally speaking, it's not very efficient to use with a fast attacking skill. So there's better supports you can use for like just the raw POB DPS number, which would be like Life Tap's actually half okay. Ruthless is okay, but this makes clearing feel so much better. And on some rares, it provides a lot of burst damage because the way it stores up 5 charges, then all goes off. Plus, it looks freaking sweet. You know, that's a big part of it. So I decided to go Shockwave, Multi-Strike, Hypothermia, since I have this mastery where all damage chills. For maces, this is almost always up outside of maps where mobs are immune to ailments. Pulverize, so the AoE is bigger on this, but all these apply outside of Multi-Strike. These apply to Shockwave, so Pulverize is really ideal. Hypothermia applies. Awaken Void Manipulation, since all my damage is chaos-based, applies to this and Volcanic Fissure. And then, of course, Volcanic Fissure of Snaking. I do need to try to get this into a 21 Veil version, so I need to mess with some Corrupting Temples, because then I would just have another skill that press on bosses to burst them down. And as far as auras, I'm doing Determination, Tempest Shield, Blood and Sand, and then you swap this around depending on what you're doing. One's more AoE, one's 15% more damage, and has a little penalty to the flop. So if you do the area damage one, it has less area effect, and if you do the area effect, it does slightly less damage. But it's pretty easy enough to swap around when you're fighting whatever you're doing. Generally for mapping, I leave it on this, and then when I get to the boss, I just swap it over, if I even remember to. This is something I wish I could figure out a better way of doing, but applying Wither, I'm doing the old trick of Wither Totems, Spell Totem, faster cast rate, and multiple totems. I've considered swapping this out for increased duration so the Wither stays on longer. Yeah, it's not as ideal. It's a huge section of damage that's not up as much as I thought it could be. Another method would be like a Balance of Terror. If you cast Despair in like I think it's the last 10 seconds, you get Wither on hit, and I would just like throw a Despair out. It doesn't matter if it hits anything because I have it on my gloves, and that way I would just get Wither on hit. But then that comes at the opportunity cost of a Jewel Socket, which is probably worth, but yeah, it's something I'm considering late game. clarity. The clarity is simply for it's a level 1 and I put it on my life because my Watcher's Eye has the -5 mana cost, and then I'm also running precision for the 60% increased attack damage, which is a lot of extra damage for this build because it's starved for increased sources of damage. I think that should be the gist of everything. Yep. Future plans would be to get accuracy rolls on this, this, and this, and then all my dex tattoos I would tattoo into accuracy path over here. And then, assuming I'm still playing, would be the fix the mace, and then also on the Forbidden Flesh and Flame, steal the Berserkers 40% more damage for trade off a 10% damage increase, which is like the equivalent of 2 endurance charges versus the upside is pretty immense. And that, I mean, between the jewels and this node, that's 80% more damage. Make a big difference, but yeah, it just costs a lot, and I've been toying around with other builds. But yeah, this one's been probably my favorite. I think it's the most like unique to the league. I can't remember the last time I took wards seriously outside of like when ward stackers became like meta, and that's been even quite some time now. But those were always kind of gimmicky, where I feel like this is a true ward tank. But yeah, I should probably have more updates in the future. Hope you guys enjoy. Catch you later.